Some wounds don't bleed, but they suffocate you for a lifetime. My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old. There was a time I believed life was a canvas you could color with love and hope. I used to believe that if I was good enough, loving enough, I would be loved in return. But no, effort doesn't always get rewarded. 3 years ago, I lost everything. My husband, my family, my faith in love. All because I couldn't have children. I met Scott when I was 23. He was kind, smart, and incredibly charming. We met at an outdoor concert on a rainy afternoon. My clothes were soaked, and he was the only one who offered me his jacket. In that moment, I thought, maybe, this is the person I'll spend my life with. The first 6 months were wonderful. We laughed a lot, shared everything, from favorite foods, tiny dreams, to our deepest fears of abandonment. I told him about my childhood, about my parents who always wished I'd been born a boy, and how I'd spent years trying to earn their approval in my own home. Scott held me close and said, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You deserve to be loved exactly as you are." And in that moment, I believed him. 6 months into dating, Scott met my parents. To my surprise, they adored him. They asked him everything about work, his family, his future plans. And for the first time, I felt like they actually wanted to connect with me. Through him. I knew why. To them, Scott was the son they never had. After that meeting, my mother started calling me weekly, something she'd never done before. Deep down, I knew it wasn't really about me, but I was still happy. I craved love from my family so badly that I was willing to take any affection, even if it came indirectly. 2 years later, Scott proposed to me, under the cherry blossom tree I loved most in the city park. I cried, not out of surprise, but because for once, I felt like I finally belonged to someone. After the wedding, life seemed perfect. We moved into a house near my parents. Just 6 months after we got married, my mother brought up the topic of children. "You're not that young anymore. It's time to give me a grandchild." I forced a smile. I wasn't ready. I was still pursuing a second degree, still building my career. But Scott looked at me with so much hope in his eyes. "If you're okay with it, I think we should start soon." So, for him, I said yes. I put school on hold. I paused my dreams. I chose motherhood. But after a year of trying, nothing happened. I went to the doctor. And then, the news shattered me. I couldn't conceive naturally. I stayed silent for a long time in that clinic. Scott squeezed my hand and said we could try IVF, or even adopt. He told me everything would be okay. But when we got home, I saw it in my mother's eyes. Disappointment. She didn't hug me, didn't ask if I was all right. She just sighed and walked away. And I understood. To them, I had failed. I tried to stay calm. I told my mother, "I'll consider IVF once we've saved enough money." She looked at me and said, "By then it'll be too late. Don't you know time doesn't wait?" I was stunned, not because of her words, but because of her eyes. They no longer belonged to a mother. They were the eyes of someone looking at something broken. I called her afterward. I told her everything I had held inside. I told her I couldn't bear being treated like a machine whose only worth was reproduction. I told her if they couldn't accept me as their daughter, then they should stop trying to contact me. And they agreed. No calls, no messages, no concern. I thought Scott would be my anchor. But a few months after that phone call, he started changing. He grew distant, cold. And then one day, he handed me divorce papers. I don't feel the same anymore. I think we should stop here. I collapsed. But what hurt more, what broke me beyond repair, was finding out he had moved in with my parents. They chose him. Over me. Their own daughter. And that was the moment I thought, maybe my life had truly ended. I left the city. No goodbyes. No forwarding address. I moved to a quiet suburb where no one knew who I was. No longer Emily, the woman who couldn't have children. No longer Scott's ex-wife. No longer the disappointment in her parents' eyes. Here, I was just Emily, a woman trying to piece herself back together. Each morning, I woke up at 6 a.m., drank a hot cup of tea, took a walk around the neighborhood, and when night fell, I wrote. I wrote letters to the child I never had. I wrote about the dreams I had buried. I wrote to fill the emptiness inside. I wrote to remind myself I still existed. I rented a small apartment, took a clerical job at a local health center. No one asked about my past, and I didn't offer anything. Time passed. 1 year, 2. I no longer cried myself to sleep. I started to laugh, genuinely laugh. Not because I was pretending to be okay, but because I was starting to feel okay. And yet, there was still a void. One thing I couldn't let go of. I still wanted to be a mother. Not to prove my worth, not to win anyone back, but because deep down, I knew I could be a good mother, one who loved unconditionally. 3 years after the divorce, I returned to the hospital, the same one where I'd once heard the crushing news that I was infertile. But this time, I didn't walk in carrying despair. I walked in carrying hope. I chose IVF on my own. The doctor asked me, "Do you have someone supporting you?" I smiled. "Yes, I have myself." I chose an anonymous donor. I signed all the papers. I endured every hormone injection, every wave of nausea, every sleepless night. No one held me. No one held my hand. But I kept going, one step at a time. And then, one October morning, I held a pregnancy test in my hands. 2 pink lines. I collapsed to the bathroom floor, crying. But this time, they were tears of joy. I gave birth to Ava, my daughter, on a quiet night. No rain, a gentle breeze. No one in the delivery room except the doctor and nurses. But the moment I heard her cry, I knew I was no longer alone. Ava looked just like me. Big brown eyes, a tiny nose, and a gaze that melted my heart. I held her close, and I made her a promise. "You will never have to wonder if you are loved, because I will spend every day showing you that you are." 3 months after her birth, my life was quiet, but full. I worked part-time, hired a trustworthy nanny. I cared for my daughter, read books, wrote stories. I didn't even think about Scott anymore, until that day. It was a beautiful sunny day. I was strolling around the neighborhood with Ava in her stroller. She was fast asleep, her tiny hand clutching a small teddy bear. I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't anticipating anything. But then, just a few houses away, Scott and my parents walked out of a nearby home. I froze. They stopped too, and as if fate had orchestrated it, they started walking toward me. My mother looked at Ava. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. My father whispered, Is she?" Scott looked at me, not with anger or coldness, but with the eyes of someone filled with regret. He asked quietly, "Is she yours? You have a baby?" I nodded. I looked them all straight in the eye and said, "Yes, she's my daughter." Scott stared at me. My parents stared at Ava, and I stared back at all three, with a strange, unsettling calm. How did you have a child?" Scott asked, his voice raspy. I lifted Ava up gently, kissed her forehead, and replied, "IVF. I chose an anonymous donor. I did it on my own." My mother rolled her eyes. My father nodded slightly, as if evaluating a product. Scott looked confused. You went through all of it without me?" I let out a laugh, but it wasn't a joyful one. "Exactly. Because of you, I had to do it alone." Silence. All three of them just stood there. Then my mother finally spoke. "Can we come inside and talk?" I looked at her. My eyes held no anger, only indifference. I'd rather let a pack of wild animals into my house than the three of you. Scott stumbled over his words. Emily, please, maybe running into you today is a sign. Maybe. We should give it another shot. I could barely believe what I was hearing. You abandoned me when I was at my lowest. All it took was a few words from my parents and you gave up on me. And now, just because I have a child, you want to come back? No, Scott. Never. My father cut in. Do you even realize how selfish you were? Back then, all you did was cry and mope. You didn't care how hard it was for the rest of us. I looked him straight in the eye. The rest of you? You mean the people who treated me like a broken incubator? My mother snapped. We were only trying to do what's best for you. We were just disappointed. Because you didn't try hard enough. Didn't try? I choked on my words. I injected hormones until I bled. I couldn't sleep. I was drowning in despair. But all you saw was that I couldn't give you a baby. And that made me worthless. Scott lowered his head in silence. But I wasn't finished. I'm not an incubator for anyone. Not for you. Not for them. No one gets to demand I bring a child into this world just to fill the void in their broken souls. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I wasn't going to answer it. But something told me I should. I picked up. Emily, it's me. Scott, I said nothing. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Back then, I let your parents influence me. They told me you were selfish, that I deserved someone better. And I believed them. I was wrong. In the background, I heard my mother's voice. Tell her to give us a chance. I sighed. Stop pretending. I know exactly what this is. Scott stayed quiet. You're not reaching out because you care about me. You're reaching out because of Ava. Because now that I have a baby, suddenly I matter again. But 3 years ago, I begged for comfort, for compassion. Did any of you offer it? My mother's voice came through the phone, cold and cutting. You were only thinking about yourself. Everyone was in shock when they found out you were infertile. You didn't give anyone else space to process. My throat tightened with rage. I won't apologize for being in pain, and I sure as hell won't apologize for surviving. I hung up. My heart was pounding. And I knew this wasn't over yet. 2 days later, midday, my phone rang. It was Ava's nanny. Emily? I'm so sorry, but Scott is outside your house, banging on the door. He's drunk and he keeps screaming your name. My blood ran cold. Ava was home. Take her to your place. Use the back door and lock everything. I'll call the police. I rushed home. By the time I got there, the police had already restrained Scott. His face was flushed, his eyes glassy, his breath reeking of alcohol. I was shaking, but I stood tall. I want a restraining order, and I will press charges if he ever comes near me or my daughter again. They took him away. I sat down on the front steps and cried. But they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of release. I filed for a protection order. The police helped with the paperwork. And though I didn't have many friends left, the ones I did stood by me completely. Scott's family, the only ones who still had a shred of conscience, called to apologize for not stepping in sooner. I smiled, not bitterly, not sarcastically. I don't need apologies. I just need freedom. As for my parents, they called around, spreading rumors, saying I was selfish, ungrateful, that I had robbed them of their right to be grandparents. But no one believed them. Everyone had seen the truth for themselves. 3 weeks later, I took Ava for a walk in the park. She giggled uncontrollably at the birds flying overhead. And for the first time in years, I found myself laughing too, freely, naturally, without any walls. I knew this wasn't the end. I would still carry pain, still face doubt. but I was finally living honestly, and I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked at my daughter and said, "Ava, you are my miracle, and I promise, no matter how chaotic the world gets, I will always be your safest place." Life after the Scott incident settled into a strange kind of peace. I no longer flinched at the sound of a knock. I didn't panic when the phone rang. Every morning, Ava woke up babbling sweetly, her little hands patting my cheek. Every night, I read to her with the softest voice I'd ever used. Not because I feared disturbing someone, but because I wanted her to feel absolutely safe in this world. Being a single mother was never easy, but not once did it make me feel like I was less than enough. I started taking an online project management course during Ava's nap times. Eventually, I began a small blog, writing about motherhood, emotional recovery, and healing. No one knew my real name. I was just Ava's mom. To my surprise, hundreds of women began reading. Some messaged me to say they too had been abandoned because they couldn't have children. They told me my story made them feel lighter, that seeing me still standing, still loving, my child and myself, gave them hope. I don't consider myself inspiring. I'm just someone who survived. But maybe that's exactly what some people need. Proof that pain doesn't have to kill your kindness, unless you let it. One afternoon, I received an email from a distant relative. She said my parents were ill, and they wanted to see me. She didn't go into detail. She only said, "They miss you, and Ava." I couldn't sleep that night. I looked at Ava, fast asleep, her tiny hand still clinging to her pink teddy bear. I remembered the cruel words my mother once said, the day I begged them to understand. And they turned their backs on me. I remembered Scott's voice as he handed me divorce papers. I don't want to waste any more time. I don't hate them anymore, but I also don't owe them a second chance. The next morning, I sent a short email back. Tell them I forgive them, but I will never forget. I hope they find peace in the time they have left, but Ava is a boundary I will never let them cross. I don't think I'll ever forget the pain. Some nights I still dream about the day Scott left. Sometimes when Ava asks about Grandma and Grandpa, I go silent, but I don't hide anymore. I face it. One day, I'll tell Ava everything, when she's old enough to understand. I won't teach her to hate. I'll teach her boundaries. I'll teach her that even family doesn't have the right to hurt you forever. I used to think I had to have everything figured out to be worthy of love. But in the end, I realized just being myself was already enough. If you're watching this and you've been hurt, abandoned, betrayed, or judged for something you couldn't control, please remember, you are not alone. You are not a defective version. You are simply a human, learning to live truthfully. Share your story in the comments. Her side of the story is here to listen. And if you're looking for a place to start over, start with yourself.